Yeah, he's coming up on the monitor, all right.
What's he barking at?
Probably the male person. Okay, I think we're good now. This interruption brought to you by the dog. Welcome back to Poutine Politics. My name's Adam.
My name's Mike. I decided to do this week's topic about climate change solutions. More talking about things that not necessarily that an individual can do, but a general idea of what solutions are out there. And more importantly, I have found some website that actually took the time to figure out the cost, which in analytics, like how much is it going to cost to do X? How much is it going to cost in money? And how much is it the actual carbon footprint or whatever you want to call it, the greenhouse gas emissions? What can we do to solve the problems in different ways with a realistic tone and not trying to make it so expensive or whatever the case may be? And I found some very, very interesting things as a result of that.
So, what's the website?
There's a project. It's Drawdown is the book. It's called drawdown.org.
Okay. I'm like, wait, we have that book or we borrowed it from the library. And that's what I was thinking. I'm like, okay, anyways, I haven't read it yet.
No, it's really good because they took the time. They found out, I guess 5 years ago or whatever when they started it, that nobody had taken the time to do it. Nobody had taken the time to figure out what are the solutions that are realistic, conservatively. Like we're not talking, ambitious figures where, well, if we all go solar, it'll solve the problem. Well,
Pull all the cars off the road.
yeah, like that's not a realistic solution. That's just, oh yeah, I made up stuff. Yeah, it's gonna work great. It's gonna be awesome. So, what do you think is the number one biggest thing that realistically we can do to change? Or just start naming some stuff, and I'll tell you if it's in with the top 20.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to say one of them is going to be something about recycling, because recycling is a big problem right now in the sense that a lot of what we recycle isn't recyclable, really, or isn't getting recycled.
Nope.
Not even close to the top.
I don't think
I'd say like the coal. I'd say like switching off of coal, but I think again that's probably one that sounds too ambitious.
No,
but
what's
yeah.
what's the alternative? Like what alternative?
One of the things I've read recently was, well, and again, it doesn't necessarily go to the drawdown situation, but people are saying, well, we need to be able to ship our liquefied natural gas over to Asia so that they can use the natural gas to generate electricity instead of using the coal that they're mining in China and Australia.
Yes, that's not one of them, though.
No, I figured it probably wouldn't be because, while liquefied natural gas is cleaner, it's still a fossil fuel. And so that's not really moving towards a drawdown towards zero emissions.
No, and it's not one that's realistic. The number one that you can do, and I was like, oh, really? Wow. That can be done for governments in general is wind turbines. Onshore, like not offshore. So on
land?
On land.
Okay. You mean like all those wind turbine projects that got canceled by the Ontario government last year?
Those ones.
Sweet.
Those exact ones. And the reason why, and if you read out a little bit more about it, it's that, yes, there is a cost to build, and there is a net cost. And then what I like about this website is that they say, what is the cost in money? So there is a cost to build them, and they acknowledge that there's going to be a cost in building them. However, there is also a savings with it, and this is the part I love about this. They actually list how much it's going to save. And wind turbines, it's the number 2 one that they think can work, and it's one that can save money. So it's a net win in every way you want to look at it. Yes, it does cost upfront money, and they don't hide that cost. But overall, over time, it is going to save everybody money because coal is more expensive to transport as opposed to wind turbines. And wind turbines take up so little space, and they don't require maintenance. They don't require ongoing costs.
Right. At least the advantage for wind turbines in comparison to solar is that a wind turbine theoretically in the right location can run 24/7, right? Like obviously you're not going to have strong winds all the time, but the wind blows at night. The sun doesn't shine at night. So at least a wind turbine has the possibility of running 24/7. Now, detractors would say, okay, well, that's all well and good, but again, the wind doesn't blow enough necessarily. So it's a large, you may need a large number of turbines, like a really large number of turbines to generate the kind of electricity that we do from other sources right now. And there's obviously the NIMBYism involved with it. I don't want a wind turbine that's in my field of view. Never mind the fact that the horizon is 14 kilometers away. I have a pretty big field of view from my property.
Yes, there is the NIMBY factor and this is the part, if we change the perception on the wind turbine rather than saying it's an ugly eyesore and you realize that it's saving the planet, you have a big shift.
Does it mention anything about like smaller turbines anyways as well? Like kind of like how, people can get the solar panels installed on their roof, and those are smaller panels than the ones you see out in fields. Obviously, we have the big wind turbines that are out in fields, and then the odd place here and there when I'm traveling around, I'll see like little wind turbines kind of hanging off the corner of like a barn roof or something like that. Like obviously they're not generating a large amount of electricity, but they're doing something. Like it could be a combination of that where, if people want to install that kind of thing on their house, they can do that as well as having the large turbines out in fields that are going to obviously generate way more electricity because of their size.
And the argument about wind turbines being an eyesore, I mean, you think a coal-burning plant with its smoke coming out is not an eyesore?
Yeah, but they don't build coal power plants in nice farmland. Trust me, I have no problem with the wind turbines whatsoever. Like I used to drive quite often kind of in that area of southwestern Ontario where there's just this big chain of wind turbines going all the way up to the Bruce Peninsula. I don't live there, so obviously I'm not the person that they're talking about that's complaining about the eyesores, because I just drive by and it's like, well, that's cool that they've got all these wind turbines and alternative energy. That's a good thing. I don't have a problem with them at all. I think it's great.
Yeah. You can go solar. Solar's actually up there. So for frame of reference, they're saying atmosphere, they rank it to an equivalent. So they say we're going to use one model for it, and it's total atmospheric CO2 reduction in gigatons. So they say wind turbines, and this is all by 2050. If we go wind turbines, we can reduce it by 85 gigatons. It's not number one, though. And the one that I found number one was alarming. But if you look at like rooftop solar, even though it's number 10, it's only 25 gigatons. So it's not going to be as impactful. Still good. This is globally, so it's not like it's applicable for Canada, and then we don't broken down for Canada.
And the website goes kind of more, does it go more in depth to be like what percentage of households, I guess, would need to have that rooftop solar, or percentage of buildings or something like that?
They don't do a percentage breakdown. They just do it as what realistically could we do to provide solutions. So it's not like, and it would be up to governments individually to provide those solutions to do those things. So
because the government has to be involved.
Yeah, because if the government does nothing, businesses are going to make money. And if you're a coal producer, you're going to want to continue to produce coal.
Especially as long as the coal exists, and there's lots of it.
Yeah. And those people are going to say, well, it's more expensive to switch. And they're right. In the initial cost, it is more expensive to switch. There's no arguments there. It's the net cost later where it's cheaper.
That's the biggest problem with any change. Not even like the change to renewable energy, and it's the change of anything, is the fact that there's that big upfront cost. And people don't want to pay that big upfront cost because like nobody's going to be able to afford it, or a very small percentage of people are going to be able to afford to make that change. So it's just not worth it. And we're worried that spending too much money is going to cost, or maybe not spending too much money, but it's going to we're going to cause a recession, and the markets are going to crash, and currencies aren't going to be worth as much, and people are going to be dying in the streets. And yeah, I don't want to see people dying in the streets, but I want to see us get better. And that costs money.
Right. The reality is that if we do nothing, the overall GDP of the world will go down. Like It's just, if we do nothing, we're going to be fighting the results of climate change.
Yeah.
So that cost is coming. Are you going to pay for it now, or are you going to pay for it 3 times later? And, trying to convince people of that is always just the greatest fun. The number one biggest thing, and I was shocked to hear this, is refrigerants. Because remember how they had, they went from CFCs, right?
Yeah. Because the CFCs and aerosols that were getting released into the atmosphere were damaging the ozone layer.
Yes. And the ozone layer actually is recovering.
Yes.
And recovering quite nicely. Even though I've never heard anything about that.
No.
Because why would the news report good news?
The only time we heard really anything about the ozone layer was, oh, there's a hole in it. That's really bad. People are going to get burned by the sun, and we're going to get higher levels of cancer. And yeah, you really don't hear about the ozone layer anymore.
No, I remember. Oh, the scare tactics on the news about how bad our ozone layer was, and oh, we're all just gonna burn in like 4 seconds, and how great it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's like, okay. And now that the ozone layer is recovering, and it's recovering very well, we don't hear anything about that. Like, this is my bitterness with the news. Why don't you report something like that? You can do an in-depth story about that. It would be fantastic news.
Yeah. There's a show, I haven't watched it yet, but I've seen like clips from it. I think it's called The Newsroom. It's an HBO show. It's almost like, it's very serious, but it almost at the same time kind of makes fun of the fact that that's the way the news reports. Is like, what you hear is just all the negative stuff, and it just feels so blatant and exacerbated. But anyways,
it's sensationalism.
Yeah.
At its core. So they replaced CFCs with hydrofluorocarbons, which are 1,000 times worse than carbon dioxide. So in places where like you'll see them a lot in hotter climates, where you see air conditioner after air conditioner after air conditioner after air conditioner.
oh, you mean like here in North America?
And China's worse.
Yeah, I imagine so.
Like you can just see them all just window shakers out the wazoo just outside, and so that way people can survive. Like it's not like it's a, oh well, why are you doing this? Well, I mean, I don't like being
Sweltering hot?
Yeah, we
Like
don't.
Europe right now?
Humans don't do well in certain climates, right? Like they just don't. One of the best ways to solve that is to change from hydrofluorocarbons to more natural things. The problem with doing that is there's just a cost. It's not cheaper. It's more expensive. It's just pure cost.
Yeah.
Now you can get from, the conservative amount was 90 gigatons by doing this. Then they can say up to, the one was saying like, that's a very conservative estimate. They said they can get up to like 150 gigatons.
Mm-hmm.
By switching, which is great. Again, but it's a cost. Like if you're going to switch from HFC, there's a cost to doing it. So there's a cost to going greener. They're going to be in a situation where a government's going to have to come in and they're going to have to use dials to turn it up. So either they're going to have to make it more expensive and tax people that use HFCs and the proper disposal of it, or they're going to have to reduce the cost for the other way. But the government has to step in to do something. And that's the big thing. Like, there's other things on here, like tropical forest. Well, I can't do anything about that. Sorry. There's very little impact that I can directly have as a Canadian. Now, they also go with reduced food waste, which is something I'm surprised at. But reducing food waste is just simply don't buy more food than you need, because if you buy more food than you need and you end up reducing it, and you end up throwing it out, you're just increasing your carbon footprint.
Yeah. I won't say that we're bad at that. But we do have, food that goes bad because it sits in the fridge too long and eventually goes bad, gets mold. Hey, that's like a double hit. That's the fridge with the HFCs, and that's the food waste.
Right.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I'm doing great already.
Way to go.
Let me tell you about my car.
We're all guilty of it. One of the worst food producers are restaurants. That's why in France, they have it where you use up all the food, so it goes to food banks, things like that.
Homeless shelters and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which is, you think that would be no-brainer, but a lot of places don't do it.
Yeah.
Right. I used to work at a grocery store, and we stopped giving them to food bank.
Yeah. Did they stop just as a, we're just not doing that anymore, or did the food banks say that they just couldn't take the volume?
The food banks kept asking too much, and it was too much hassle.
Wow. That's all right. Yeah.
And
okay. I don't know what to say. I mean,
if you force humans to, if you give a human an option to do something, they're going to take the path of least resistance more often than not. Like there's sometimes that you have a good conscience, but that's not the norm. That's exceptions to the rule, right? There's people out there, like if you give them the option of buying plastic bags or bringing their own bags, and they're going to buy plastic bags every time.
Well, and I feel like part of the problem there as well with the grocery stores is, they'll put like they start slapping like the 50% off stickers on stuff or just reduced prices, but they tend to do it on produce when the produce is already in a condition that the majority of people are not going to buy it. I know that it can be difficult to time that, but you know what? A bunch of bananas that's completely yellow and starting to show a couple of spots of brown, maybe that should be a discounted a bunch of bananas as opposed to still being on the shelf at the regular price because it's still good enough. Whereas the bananas you'll see on the discounted shelf are the ones that are like half brown and starting to feel soft, and nobody's going to pick them up, except for us because we throw them in the freezer and then put them in smoothies.
If you, like I said, and the reason why you do that is because you've been incentivized to do that.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is that you have to make solutions to it. So one of the best ways to solve for governments to implement things that will allow companies in general to reduce things like that, reduce refrigeration, things like that, is a carbon tax. There's also a cap and trade. Carbon tax was, who was the one that won the Nobel Prize for it? Oh, Bill Nordhaus, the American economist that won Nobel Peace Prize. He won a Nobel Prize in economics for carbon tax because it works because you say, okay, you want to emit, we're going to charge you so much per carbon tax emission. And then use that money to then either reduce or or subsidize other people that are using less. The worst problem is that Australia did it. Australia brought in a carbon tax.
And then they repealed it when a new government came in.
And the funniest thing was that there was the party that repealed it. The only reason they repealed it was because they had a mandate to repeal it. They didn't. It wasn't because it wasn't working.
From what I read about that one, the reason they had the mandate was because of coal lobbyists. Because there's a lot of coal mining going on in Australia right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the carbon tax was repealed, because the coal lobby comes along and says, this is costing us too much money. And the government says, yes, you're right. This is costing you too much money. I'm shaking my hand in front of me while I say this. It kind of like my comment on the Canada Food Guide and with the milk. The milk lobbyists coming in and saying, "Well, the food guide needs to be changed, and we need to get milk back on there." This is my problem with money in government, with public or with private sector money in government. But we're going to leave that one for right now.
Yeah, I mean, Marketplace did a fantastic job on, like, the idea that the government should be able to put labels or whatever you want to call it, letting people know how good food is a fantastic idea.
Yep.
Make it simple. Say, like, this food is rated 5 stars. This food is rated 1. What's the difference? Well, 5 stars might be, cabbage. 1 star might be chicken nuggets, right? Like, we all understand where good food and bad food is, generally speaking, but sometimes it gets a little bit murky. And you're not really sure about, well, this one's higher in sodium, this one's higher in fat, this one's higher in omega-3s, and you're just like, what? What?
The sodium argument's going on right now with the like the Beyond Meat burger and stuff like that. I've had them; they're good. Don't trust the people that are like, "Oh, you got to eat beef every day." The Beyond Meat burger is good, and yes, the sodium level's a little bit higher in the prepared patty. But you know what? Your body knows how to handle sodium if you allow it to handle sodium properly.
And one of the other things, like number 4 on the list, was plant-rich diets.
I was gonna ask if something like reduction of livestock production or livestock consumption or something like that was going to be high on that list, because there's so much carbon emissions in the agricultural sector that goes into making that beef, because people don't think about not even the underlying costs, it's the overlying costs. It's all the farmers that have they're burning the fuel for the tractors, not just to take care of the cattle, but then it's all the crops that we grow to feed the cattle so that we can have our burgers and our steaks and to the level that we have. I'm not saying you need to stop eating beef. I'm saying that there's people that don't need to have beef 7 days a week.
That's right. And keep in mind, cows fart.
Yes.
And that's methane. That's terrible. It's one of the worst greenhouse gases. And they have to clear fields. There's a push. They also talk about mixed farming, where you don't have to decimate an entire field of trees, having a mixed environment where you can have like trees and other things, making a more sustainable farming environment.
So
rather than tillage.
I was told recently by a client of mine that I don't know if it's a local law or if it's a provincial law or something like that, because he said when he was younger, they used to, when the cattle would graze, they would go into the trees because shaded cover and stuff like that, and they would graze in the bush. You're apparently, at least Again, I don't know if it's if it's a municipal thing for like what township he's in, or if it's a provincial thing. I haven't looked that up, but he told me that there's actually rules in place that prevent him from allowing his cattle to graze in the bush. Like, who would regulate that? Why would you regulate that?
Yeah,
That's stupid.
You need to go back, like plant trees. Like if you're gonna have cows graze, plant trees. Like have them graze in. And I get the idea of it can be harder from a farmer to see all the cattle if they're in between trees. I 100% get that, right? Like chasing down cattle isn't fun to begin with. And now try and chase them around trees. That's even more fun. Cows can be trained to a degree that they'll come for certain things. So they're not actually like the dumbest animal on the planet. Close. But, they're pissed off all the cow farmers. Actually, no.
No. They know that they're pretty dumb.
Really dumb. Pigs are incredibly smart, but cows, they're so stupid. Climb upstairs, can't go down them. That's how they prevent them getting out of barns. They put up stairs so that way they can only go one way. It's a one-way entry system. So
I wonder if there's a set of stairs when cattle get sent like into an abattoir, like when they go into a slaughterhouse. They go up the stairs and then they see like all the machines and stuff that are about to tear them apart, and they're like, "Oh, the hell with this, we're getting out of here." And they turn around, look at the stairs, and like, "Nope, can't go down there."
Remember Dennis Leary saying one of the funniest things that he said, they're like, "Oh, why do we eat cows? Because they're ugly." Right? We wouldn't eat otters. They're adorable.
Yeah, the plant-based diet, that doesn't surprise me that would be so high on the list, and kind of coupling that in with the reduction of livestock consumption. As it is for the livestock that we consume, beef is the highest when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions for production.
Yeah, it's everything involved with it. Like chicken's better, but beef is way worse.
Yes. There's a investigative journalism series that was done by the Toronto Star called Undeniable. And one of the articles in there was talking about farming and about livestock. And from the charts that are in that story, the greenhouse gas emissions from cattle is 7 times worse than chicken.
Yeah, because chicken you can house in such small areas, whereas cows you have massive, massive fields.
Yeah,
right, because that's how they graze.
But they're carbon sequestering. Yeah. It's like, I mean, you're kind of carbon sequestering, except the carbon is just ending up in the cow.
Yeah.
And in the beef. And then we eat the beef. And then we excrete the beef. And where's the carbon going? It's not all staying in your body.
Yeah.
There's a process.
Yeah. And there was another website I went to that talked about how you can figure out how many trees need to be planted to offset your carbon. And I'm like, planting trees isn't one of the top ones.
No,
it's just it's good, like, but you're not going to plant enough trees to offset deforestation.
Yeah. Are you talking about that Science Magazine study, the one about the 1 trillion trees or whatever?
No. There's just a website.
It's just a website. Okay.
You can put in how much you use for car, airplane, your house, and everything like that.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I think I know what site you're talking about.
Yeah, it's an interesting website. So one of the big things that can really help with climate change is definitely carbon tax. Like the carbon tax is very effective because it allows companies, they can budget for it. They know how much emissions they can produce. They know how much it's going to cost. They can take measures to then reduce those costs. And anyone that's a high polluter is going to get charged more. You can then use that money to then fund other projects in general for whatever. Like it's just a revenue stream for the government. And you can switch it to the infrastructure needed for solar farms, solar wind generators, whatever the case may be, even solar rooftops. All those things can work. You just need to have money as a source.
And that's my problem with one of my problems with the criticism of the carbon tax is, it's just a revenue generator for the government. So, like, why? I don't understand why that's a problem. I don't understand why the government trying to raise more revenue is a problem, because it's not like all those people in the government are just pocketing that money and saying, well, this is ours now. No, it's getting repurposed. Like it's going into programs. It's going into things that are in the government's platform and their mandate for what they need to meet. And in particular, the carbon tax that we have here in Canada, in the provinces that are affected by it, all of that money that's being collected by through the carbon tax is going back to those provinces. Most of it's going back to the individuals. Some people will look at it as, well, it's kind of stupid for people to pay the carbon tax and then just give them the money back. And well, you know, if you're taking carbon tax money from people who can afford to pay it, generally the people that are higher up on the chain, and whether it's what you want to call the 1%, and some of that money is then flowing over to the lower income individual who maybe can't afford a car but is having problems affording groceries, affording heating their house, then you're helping to balance the scales a little bit.
Yeah. Like, I just roll my eyes at the idea that somehow a carbon tax can't work. And yes, there are going to be some fringe businesses that will suffer, possibly collapse, as a result of the carbon tax. I'm not going to ignore that fact. Those businesses weren't strong models, though. They weren't strong businesses. They were fledgling. We're not talking about we're going to kill off the strong ones. We're killing off the ones that are weak. As a result of doing that, you're reducing a future cost that is enormous. And it's an effective way. And oftentimes these companies, when they go with a lower carbon tax and they go with lower carbon emissions, they also realize, oh, wait, we are actually more efficient. Because we've had to, we had to research our furnaces and figure out how to do that. Oh, can we use this extra heat that we're just wasting away for something else? Oh, we're going to have concrete. Concrete's a fantastic example of something that's terrible for carbon emissions, just because how it is. Well, there's plants in Thailand that they take the concrete, they put it into a pool, they use the ammonia off the pool to then source the heat to use the concrete. They have algae that eat up all the stuff that comes off of the ammonia and stuff like that, and they just reuse it all. And because of they were using all of the excess, they found technology to do it. Now all of a sudden they're way better off. They're making more money rather than less because they're forced. They're not going to change. You're not going to. Why would a company change? Why would they take all that upfront cost unless it's going to cost us more if we continue what we're doing?
Imagine that. Job creation, new industries.
Like, you have to force people to do things. And with climate change being such a hard topic to grasp for most, it's hard for me to completely understand and how I can influence it and what I can do. Now, I went to Government Ontario's website and it said, when traveling, use bikes. It's like, really? That's your solution? That's what I can do?
Maybe we should put all of the MPPs and tell them they need to ride from Toronto, like from Queen's Park. Now, for some of them, it'll be easier than others, obviously, but they need to ride a bike from Queen's Park to their constituency office in their riding, and that's the only way they're allowed to travel to their constituencies. Some of them are going to have a great time because, like, oh, well, my constituency is like right over there, in Toronto. And you know what? Most of those ridings are currently being held by Liberal and NDP members of Parliament or members of the legislature. It'd be interesting for the PC party legislators to take their own advice.
Yeah, and like the reality is I want to make sure I'm clear on something else too. The first people to bring up climate change as a thing that we have to address were conservatives in the 80s. Margaret Thatcher was famously one of the biggest proponents of, this is going to happen. This is a problem, and we need to address it now. And she's legendary for her staunch conservative nature.
Yeah, Brian Mulroney was obviously not as high up as Margaret Thatcher. Let's start there first of all. I'm gonna give credit where credit is due. But Brian Mulroney is partially responsible for legislation that was enacted to reduce acid rain.
Yeah, Nixon brought in the EPA.
Nobody wants to remember Nixon,
right? Well, I mean, credit where credit's due.
Yeah. What were the other? Because there was 3 points on the Ontario website, on the Ontario government website for climate change. What was the other 2 points that they recommended? The one was tap water, right?
Yeah, tap water.
Okay, so that one's fine. Yes. You know what? In most communities, your tap water is fine to drink. If you don't think it is, go buy some sort of household filtration system, whether it's a filtration system that you hook up to your water line, whether it's like something in the lines of a Brita filter. We use one here that's called a Berkey, which is a gravity fed system. You just have to fill it from the tap every time that it gets close to being empty, and it just flows through the charcoal filters. It's tap water that's, you're still filtering it a little bit more to make it a little bit cleaner, but then you're not using the plastic bottles.
I go with a water cooler. Now, some people say, oh, well, then you're using plastic. Well, a water cooler, the idea is, one, I'm not using plastic bottles every time I drink.
Yeah.
Two, I'm reusing that water cooler jug every time I go to the water store. I'm just using their water, not my water.
Yeah, because you're refilling it from their tap, right?
Yeah, so they're doing their process, whatever, and I'm paying for them to do it.
Yep.
As opposed to what you're doing, where you're you're doing it your way, and that saves you cost because then you don't have to pay for it like I do when I have to go. But it's still cheaper. Like, understand something: a water cooler jug is so much cheaper than water bottles.
Oh yeah,
and if you get a water cooler, I mean, yeah, there's an upfront cost for that.
but not that much.
It's not that expensive.
$200, maybe.
Yeah, it was
I
$200.
know, I understand. Yeah, okay, I should rephrase that and say yes. I understand there are plenty of people out there that a $200 upfront cost
For sure.
would be hard, and I'm not going to deny that.
But if you have a $200 upfront cost and it's costly for you, don't go water bottles. Drink from the tap.
Drink from the tap.
With the other thing they put on is public transit. Now, I'd like to see it if the Ontario government's trying to push that we should use public transit, they should use public transit, not just bike riding.
Yep.
No, everywhere you have to go, you have to use public transit. You want other people to do this to reduce their climate footprint.
Yeah.
You use public transit. Now, if you're taking a bunch of MPs to a location, that's fine. You can rent a bus. That's still
Charter bus.
you can. That's fine. I have no problems with that. That's a fantastic way to reduce
Maybe we should throw them on school buses.
school buses. Yeah, that'd be great. No, I mean a charter bus is fine because it's not. It's still better than each person driving their own car. If you want to promote that, then you follow the lead, right? They also said to buy locally and things like that. It's like, well, with all these things that they're trying to promote, they're not doing anything to incentivize people to do it, or the opposite, punishing people that are the opposite side.
Well, the other problem too, again, at least in Ontario, is they had that whole advertising campaign about, oh, the carbon tax is bad and it's going to cost everybody money. We have a plan for climate change. Go to the Ontario government website for climate change. Their plan is literally the 3 points that we just covered.
Yeah,
That's their plan right now. There is no other language on there about upcoming legislation or anything like that. It's essentially climate change. It's on you.
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, the other solution is nothing. So,
And I don't want government to come up with all the solutions, but I want to feel like they're part of the team.
yeah, you don't have to. And I don't want. I really don't want the government to come up with individual solutions. So I don't want them to say, everyone has to ride their bikes, or everyone has to, or everyone has to do whatever the case may be. I want a large concept where it forces people to do things with very minor inconveniences. So, like the carbon tax. That's why the carbon tax works, because it just forces you to do it. Like, there's a cost. And it's simple, it's straightforward. It is the least involvement for the government because they don't have to do anything.
Maybe, just maybe, the carbon tax will make it so that one of the most advertised vehicles in this country, the Ford F-150, won't be one of the most popular vehicles for people to buy. How many people that buy a Ford F-150 or Dodge Ram or whatever, quote unquote low model truck? How many people that buy those vehicles actually need them, actually use them for what they're for?
You can get away with a little quarter ton. You don't need a full ton truck with dualies on the back. Just show how big your truck is.
Don't forget the farm plates. I mean,
Farm plates.
again, there's legitimate farm trucks, but I've literally seen a truck in town that has farm plates on it, that has like stovepipe exhaust pipes coming out of the flatbed of the truck. And like, okay, I can look at that, and it's very obviously not a farm truck.
No.
Somebody should pull your plates.
I'm surprised electric vehicles wasn't up as high as it was, but it is what it is. Anyway.
All right, so let's get the website so that people can
Drawdown.org.
Yeah, take a look at it. I do remember looking at that website. I didn't look into it completely in depth, but anyways, go take a look.
Yeah, it's got the cost. It's got how much the current emissions would be if if governments pursued these things to reduce it. It's got the cost, upfront cost, like how much it would cost to implement the whatever structure it may be, and also if there's any savings or costs associated with it. So, for instance, like wind turbines reduces cost, but refrigeration management increases cost. And they take a look at that, which is great because that's what I want to find out about. Like, where should we be targeting? That's what I want to go with, right?
And I know there's like a book that's essentially a compendium for that website, which is called Drawdown as well. So whether it's bookstore, library, ebook, whatever, take a look, find the book, read it, take a look at the website, read over the information there. There's a lot of good, solid information that honestly we should be, as individuals, we should almost be lobbying our governments to be like, this is the stuff we need to do.
Mm-hmm. And voting that way.
Yes. We are, okay, I'm going to date the podcast again, okay? I'm going to do that.
Yeah,
It's August 1st that we're recording this, August 1st, 2019. The election is on October 21st, 2019. So we are about 2.5 months away from the time of recording. Vote.
Yes.
Vote.
You need to vote. And don't feel, and I know a lot of people feel like, well, if I vote, for instance, the Green Party, the one that's actually doing something for climate change, they're not going to get in. They may not get in this election, but the more votes they get this election, the more chances they have for next election.
Not only that.
It's weird to say that.
Not only that, but when you consider the fact that we're most likely heading into a minority parliament, even let's say if they win 5 seats, that still gives them a voice.
Yeah. And they can make people sway.
Right. Now, this isn't like an endorsement saying go out and vote Green Party, because you know what? Vote for the party that you believe has your best interests. I don't care what party you vote for, but vote for the party that has your best interests, but vote, okay? The fact that in the last federal election, the number of voters went up, but it was still only 56% of eligible voters, that's sad. All right. That's the end of that rant. This has been Poutine Politics. My name is Adam.
My name is Mike.
Talk to you soon.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Poutine Politics. Be sure to keep up with us online and through social media. Our website is poutinepolitics.ca. You can find us on Facebook at Poutine Politics. You can find us on Instagram at Poutine Politics. You can find us on Twitter at Politics Poutine, because Twitter thought we were French. We're on YouTube. We also started a Patreon page at Patreon, patreon.com/PoutinePolitics. We hope we entertained you enough that you can show us some love, maybe some money. We'll be back next week with